That's really good, Faith. Julia, thanks so much for playing today.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful to meet you for the first time and
Yeah,
make music together straight away.
Yeah, amazing.
Olivia was saying backstage how kind of intimate it is to meet somebody and immediately start playing like quite intense personal music together without really knowing them.
It's true, but you know, because you sent me a lot of great links to things that you've done, and you know, and I've heard about you and been aware of you and everything, and I was completely 100% confident that I was going to be in great hands, and my music would be in great hands.
Great.
So yeah, that wasn't as terrifying a thing as it might have been.
It wasn't terrifying for me. I was just
good.
You know, trying to be in the moment and try and follow what you're doing as best I can. So let's talk about songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how. This is a question I'm going to ask a few different people in the series because I suspect they'll all have different interesting answers. So tell me how you go about writing a song, like what kind of processes you use, or tools, or instruments, or whether you need to be in certain states of mind to write. And just tell me about how you go about it.
Well, you know, this has evolved. It's evolving. It evolves as I'm evolving as a musician and as I'm growing and, you know, learning new things and stuff. But up to now, the music that I put out has been very much a kind of like, I'll sit at the piano and some chords will come to mind, or they'll just come to my fingers, or I find some chords somehow. And then I go, I'm feeling this. When I start feeling something, and then some melody will come, and then normally, or I trained myself, I suppose, to kind of, because I used to be really super slow and it would be painful and I couldn't remember what I'd done, and then I had to get it. You know, it was really super slow. And then I sort of gradually trained myself to kind of go, okay, let's capture this moment and what are the words that are coming from my subconscious mind for this mood and this melody. And so I'd get a few words at that point, and that tends to, when I'm really properly feeling things, which is the only way I can write. I can't write people, you know, I haven't so far in my life written songs to order for other people or anything like that. I've just,
in a kind of mechanical way.
Yeah, it's not really been.
So you do need to be in a certain state then.
I do need to be in a certain state, and the certain state comes from a sort of like, I don't know, it's quite interesting. I get quite kind of like unsettled quite often. And then, you know, and that happens if I haven't been doing enough music, you know, but sometimes, you know, the work and life of a modern day musician isn't all about the music.
Sure.
So if I haven't been doing enough music, I can get quite kind of like, So... and
that's when you start writing and good stuff happens, maybe.
Well, it used to be like that. Now I'm trying, especially like this year, I've been trying to do more music, and things are evolving. So I was going to say that I would choose between a piano and guitar. Sometimes I'd start at the piano and go, I'm not really feeling this, and I go to the guitar. Guitar I've only been playing for like 15 years, which isn't very long in guitar terms, so you know.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
So but now, because all the way along I've been, you know, getting involved with software sequencing and producing and things like that.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that more these days, and now at the minute I'm writing in a completely different way.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
using this technology.
Yeah, I'm using technology to just kind of get more, like I'm working more with sort of grooves and exploring groove and how I'm going to weave a song with elements of production that are already there. And so I have kind of done that in the past, and then you work backwards to translate what that ends up being into a solo voice and piano thing, or solo voice guitar, or just, you know, whatever live format you want to do it.
Yeah. And when you
so
say
it's evolving, yeah.
Like, how do you access your subconscious to get the lyrics? What does that actually mean? Like, the lyrics come from your subconscious. That's quite a hard one, but...
Well, I think that there's kind of like... Obviously, the subconscious mind is always there, but we are in tune with it to greater and lesser extents. And I think that, for me, the practice the practice as a musician is to to allow the subconscious mind to do its thing, and for me to get out of the way, my conscious mind to get out of the way. And the more I do that, the more I sort of go for that. It's a kind of like a weird feeling, can't really describe it, just a sort of allowing. It's an allowing. Allow things to come through, you know. It's the same state, you know, like when we're playing together, of just not thinking. You know what I mean? Not thinking, because
sort of constantly going, like fighting the instinct to think, right?
Yeah.
That in itself is a kind of thought.
So I suppose so. Yeah, it's
get
best.
Away from that.
Yeah, best when you don't think. Just leave the thoughts, because but it's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard.
It's hard, but that's the best thing.
Yeah, but grooves are good at kind of taking you away from that, aren't they? Somehow.
They do, yeah. And in terms of my own music making, it's kind of weird how I've come to sort of only sort of start with grooves at this late stage. You know, I'll be making album 5, and that's like the first time really when I'm going to start with a groove.
How do you know when songs are finished, and at the same time, like, do your songs come out fully formed, or do you have to revise them infinitely and boil them down? Like,
I have done that. I've done everything, all parts of that. I've had some songs that I've written, chipped away at really slowly over like 3 years or something.
Yeah.
And other songs that have come in like an afternoon and everything in between, really. But I know when it's not finished, and then I know when it is finished.
All right, you do know. That's impressive. Most people agonise about that moment, I would say.
Oh, do you think? I know. I'm kind of, you know, it's sort of like, it's like sort of solving a Rubik's Cube or something like, or something else. No, not really Rubik's Cube. It's like solving a big puzzle. Okay. And all the parts have got to fit and be supported by everything. It's got to be balanced. Everything's got a balance, and lyrically, you know, it's got to crunch in certain places. It's got to, you know, something's got to vibe something about it for me. Yeah. Because I always think about, like, I'm going to be performing this song. It's got to mean something to me. It's got to mean something to me. And actually what's quite interesting about my songs and performing them is that what they mean to me changes as well over time. Which is interesting. Or actually even, they don't, the real meaning of it, because it comes from the subconscious a lot of the time, you don't really necessarily know the meaning when you're writing it.
That's the best bit for me. One thing for the audience not to know the meaning, that's great. But if you yourself don't know the meaning, that's even better as far as I'm concerned.
It's a funny feeling, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that surprised me today, like meeting you and playing with you for the first time, was, retrospectively it shouldn't be surprising, because like you come from a jazz background, partially at least. Or a lot, I guess. Experientially. Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of your music making. Yeah. One of the things that really surprised me was how much improvisation there is in your music. Like, a lot of singer-songwriters who kind of maybe start in jazz and then they kind of move in their own direction. Then sometimes a big portion of their improvising gets sort of lost along the way, but you've managed to keep that not only in your singing, which is really so free, but also in your piano playing. So like, speak to me a little bit about improvising and how important that is to you. Yeah,
it's really important to me because, you know, I did start, as you said, I come from a jazz background, kinda, you know. I came late to making music and to jazz. When I heard jazz for the first time, my ears pricked up and I felt instinctively like this music speaks to me, specifically Billie Holiday, Cassandra Wilson and Nina Simone, all those 3 women. Something about their freedom in their vocal delivery that was really like arresting for me, and I found that exciting. And something, so sort of vocally I was interested in being in the moment and being free to just be expressive, and how exciting that was. So I've always been interested in that. And then Because, like, how can I explain this? It's just sort of, you know, jazz to me represented is a freedom of spirit. And that's something I obviously needed, and I still continue to try to navigate myself towards an as fuller and fullest sense of the word in all contexts, you know. But at the same time, music is the main vehicle in which that I found that to be attainable to any
Talking about freedom.
degree. Freedom.
Yeah.
And that sort of a wholeness of spirit as well, you know. Because we go through lots of experiences, don't we, in our lives or we just, I don't know, there's something about my background and, you know, my parents from far-flung places and coming to live here and being born here and growing, and then just kind of like never feeling like it's not quite fitting, you know. And then finding music and finding this is a whole other world that you can create, that you can design, that in which you belong. Yeah. It's absolutely brilliant. You know? Yeah. It's been amazing. I'm quite grateful to the younger me for taking the leap of faith, because it was quite a big leap of faith at the time.
Right, and it's sort of, in a way, when you're like 18, it's sort of maybe easier to do that because you don't think about it so much. But the cool thing is that you've managed to keep that. That's what's surprising to me, because like...
But I wasn't 18, it was 10 years after that. So that's why I say I started late.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So, but you know, like what is it that's, you know, a lot of people would get these tunes and they'd like set the piano parts a lot more, and they'd set the vocals a lot more. I think most singers would actually, like. So what is it that stops you from doing that? Like, or do you not even think about that? Is it not even an option because of this idea about jazz being like intrinsically about freedom, kind of put in a political kind of way? Like,
I think that it has got to do with freedom, because you know, I was told before in previous years, oh, you should just sing the same thing. If you sing the song, you should sing it the same every time. That's what people want. I've been actually told that
by teachers or by,
I can't really say who.
Not who, but like what kind of role is that person? Industry people.
Yeah, industry people.
Oh well.
And honestly, I sometimes think, God, why did I listen to any of this stuff?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that and I was, because I think partly because I wasn't trained and I didn't really know, like, anything. I didn't trust my gut enough. I didn't really, like, whatever. Anyway, so I kind of went along with that for a bit and felt increasingly unhappy.
Yeah.
And
I can't imagine it suited you.
No, because it's just like, you feel so stifled, and then you just get really bored as well, because you don't feel the music at that point. I don't think it's possible to really be in the music if you're doing it robotically.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. And like, obviously, like, trying to define what jazz is like pretty difficult and pretty controversial as well. But why do you think, like, it's so difficult for some people to accept this kind of marriage of the idea of freedom with jazz? Like, why do people fight against that?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting question. I think we've got to talk. We've got to talk about the origins of jazz and why it is an art form that we are able to express ourselves through, and the origins of jazz is that, you had a very oppressed African American slave population who they and their, generations that came after evolved this music because they were lacking freedom in literally every other aspect of their lives, and this is it was essential. What do you do? With music, there's a possibility to at least create spiritual freedom. So it's come from this absolute burning desire, quest to allow some freedom in their spirits, and that is the origins of the music. It's an African American folk art form.
Yeah.
Born of the oppression of the slaves.
And so somehow, I guess you would say that while the music can kind of evolve in infinite directions, would you say that you still want it to somehow resemble that, or somehow remain true to, how does it remain true to that feeling or that thing?
That is
without...
the feeling is like you bring what was if we break down what's actually were going on there.
Yeah.
There are lots of influences, from the African roots and from all the blues and loads of things. I don't profess to be an expert, but
Sure.
it's loads of influences that were current at the time to create music that spoke to people and spoke to the people making it, that felt like this is an urgent thing that we need to do and we need to express. And as we, generation upon generation has gone on, and wherever the music has gone, like the idea of spiritual freedom has travelled with the music, travelled to South Africa, where my father's from, and we think about, there the struggles for freedom too, and so it's taken up, I think, by people who, for whatever reason in their own personal lives, are seeking freedom from whatever it is. So now, but everybody's individual influences that they'll be bringing, if they're going to be true to their spirit, they should be bringing those influences, not just ancestral ones, but current ones in which they've grown up, and you bring all those influences together and still be free in your delivery and in your improvisation according to what makes you and your own experiences. And that for me is jazz. So that's why jazz can travel, but jazz doesn't necessarily remain jazz. It becomes something else when we recreate what went before.
Right.
Then to me that's jazz history.
I see, right. I see.
Then you're representing jazz history, and I don't really think you can at that point call it. Depends, but it's definitely it's jazz history.
Yeah, and you'd say it's not jazz. I mean, some people say that's a strong statement, but I can totally see what you mean.
It is a strong statement, and and I have
accept that.
I have performed many jazz history gigs, if you like, and I have improvised through them, so I have given my own take on it. I mean, I've not done it I've not learnt anyone's solos or anything like that, but I don't think that is necessarily in the spirit of the jazz that I feel speaks to me.
Okay, so your new album, is called Black and White Volume 1. Volume 1 tells me, and I hope there'll be lots more volumes because it's amazing.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the title of that album, because I'm sure there's so much behind it.
Yeah, so I named the album Black and White Volume 1 in the summer of 2019. So it was these, this topic of these words that were used to describe people, this binary concept that the whole world seems to have evolved, and so that I was kind of left wondering, well, I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to be in this binary context, and just feel that it's very, it's obviously lacking a lot of nuance. There's a lot of stories within the world, and just to define everything as black and white, as in conversation, so for people, and to just gather everyone's experience under these umbrellas, as if generations of black and white people haven't gone to create me. So that's kind of why I went for the title Black and White, because generations have gone to make me as I've come out like this. Yeah. And we're together, and the concept of this whole concept of race, of I can't even, this word race, it's as if there's more than one human race. It just bugs me.
Of course, yeah.
And so black and white is to sort of say, we have this binary concept which is ridiculous, and there's all colours, and everybody is to be celebrated, and with all of the colours together, okay, so I've only mentioned two, but with all of the colours together, in the piano and in myself, just take the two colours of the piano as well, and these two colours of myself, and create something that has hopefully lots of sonic colour.
Yeah, well, it's super interesting. The title. I mean, I guess it's hard to come up with like a catchy title and also kind of imbue it with all this meaning. But I think you probably managed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because then after that, so there's me considering like, or coming into sort of racial, I'll use this word, racial consciousness.
Yeah.
At quite a late point in my life, you know, relatively speaking, and thinking about it a lot. I'm just, you know, just sort of thinking about what it means then for me to be here and now navigating the world in this skin, and how I'm coming across to people, and how it's sort of, you know, how that surface level of being is interacting with everything. And so there's an awful lot to think about there. And then of course everything just last year, 2020, with you know, poor George Floyd's murder and all the Black Lives Matter protests, and suddenly everyone's talking about it. So it's a good thing. It needs to happen. It needs to happen because, you know, racism is real, and people's lives, the potential of a lot of people's lives is, you know, we're all missing out by blindly continuing this sort of weird construct.
Yeah, which is not even that ancient at the same time. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is this question of like delivery. I'm slightly changing direction here, but delivery, like, you mentioned like Billie Holiday, Nina and Cassandra Wilson, but like I also love especially Billie Holiday.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Like,
she's the best.
She's, you know,
Phenomenal.
goddess for me. But delivery, like, are you kind of drawn towards a really committed, emotionally explicit, let's say, kind of delivery in other people or in yourself, or are you more into like kind of restraint and a bit of creating a bit of distance between your delivery and the thing itself?
Well, I think that's very much dependent on the mood of the song and what the song is expressing. That I have some songs that I didn't play today, but some songs that probably will be a bit more aloof, you know, because it's not necessarily so much about the vocal. I think when you have, certainly in a stripped down context like piano and voice, and that's it.
Yeah.
If there wasn't some engaging emotion in the vocal, it wouldn't be that listenable. And you're relying on the vocal to tell a story in an emotional way as well as lyrically and melodically, and it's got to fulfill all of those three things to be a successful thing, I think. So but that's not the case for all musical contexts, you know. So something which is more about the beat and people want to dance, you don't really necessarily, it depends again on the context of that, you know, but it doesn't necessarily have to go to that extent. You know, the emotional delivery. I think, you know, coming back to Billie Holiday, the way they recorded certainly in the early recordings, where she would be standing closest to the mic and everyone else, and it's a beautiful sound. I actually experimented a little bit with that when I was, well, a long time ago.
Could you make it work?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
With one microphone.
Yeah, with one microphone to recreate that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and just while we're on that topic, like, did you record your album, your new album, together, voice and piano at the same time? I'm guessing you did. Right?
I did, yeah. I did, and it was an album, you know, because a lot of singer-songwriters would probably start on their own, you know, and just composing on their own. Whereas because, you know, I told you that, at uni when I was studying languages, I was drawn to restarting on the piano. But then it was, you know, I didn't then follow that up with going to music college or anything like that. Did consider it, but I decided not to. And I decided to...
Why did you decide not to?
Because instinctively I felt that I needed to free my spirit, really, and that it would. I'd already started meeting a few musicians, some of whom had been to music colleges and kind of gone, oh, well, you know, I don't know if I feel as if I've lost the essence of a bit of what I was into. And when people were telling me that, I just thought, oh, yeah, probably I'll just leave it then, because...
Right. There's definitely a danger of being fed too much stuff.
Yeah. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go and do some little classes instead. So I enrolled in a couple of things, and I went along to the first class where it was about harmony or something like that. And I was just like, oh my days, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
I didn't know, I don't know if they just assumed a lot of knowledge or something, but anyway, I was just like, this is frying my brain. This is not the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
And I just learned languages, sort of learned them, you know, in that kind of not particularly intuitive way. More so with German actually than with French, but I'd spent a long time like learning languages in a not terribly intuitive way, so I didn't really want to do that with music. I wanted to just let it
feel your way slowly
feel my way through.
Yeah.
It's been long to do that. It is
Yeah.
long to do that, but I think that the reason that I can feel free in the music is because of it. So I mean, yeah, I just know that I have not probably at any point been ready to go to music college until maybe now, but now I'm just like, oh well, whatever.
You're more likely to teach me but yeah, so just going back to that thing, like this is quite a specific kind of thing in a way, but it is interesting, like about process, about like what technology. It would be so easy to kind of record a piano and voice album and do the parts separately, but like why wouldn't you do that? This kind of also goes back to freedom and like what jazz is, but why did you decide to record?
Oh yeah, so I didn't
same
actually
time?
finish answering that question, did I? Because I wanted to say that I only made this solo album. So like having like created this sort of weird journey into it, what actually happened was I met a bunch of musicians who had been to music college and fell in with them and everything, and just all kind of suddenly I was just doing it, you know, and that was cool. And so I'd gone from having like quite a large band, and then slowly, like, and the economics of travelling, everything got smaller. And suddenly I was doing a trio, and it was great to do, but with huge learning curve. You go from a 6-piece band and you're just standing there to now you're playing the trio, and you are the piano player.
You've got to generate all the energy, everything, yeah.
You know, I was just like, wow. So there's a lot to learn there, and then to go from that to come down to solo, for me that's the hardest thing. That's like to actually get to that point of like, okay, I'm going to record an album simultaneously singing and playing on my own. That's like,
right, so that's
the hardest thing.
You see that as like some sort of achievement.
I do.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
I do. For me, it's
ridiculously
like,
hard and brave thing to do, you know.
Yeah, for me, it's just I feel like,
especially live together.
I feel pleased that I've managed to get to that point where I could consider recording the two together, and I was probably made the album at the first available point in my, I think anyway, for me to come out with a result that I liked.
Do you think with the right recording process and technique and maybe the right producer you'd be able to make it sound like that by doing it separately, or would there be no point in that, and would you miss something? What would you miss if you did it in a more kind of pop way, let's say?
Well, I think I probably would have come out with a completely different melody.
Yeah. The actual content would be completely different for a start, so there's not even any point even.
No, it would be completely different. Like, you know, if I played the piano part and then sang the words, it would just sound completely different. It would be a totally different melody.
Yeah.
So they come together. Yeah, I think. Like,
and this thing of playing by yourself, like you're obviously. I mean, going back to this thing of delivery, like I would say like. You've got an amazing balance between like complete commitment in your delivery and like presence and being there in the moment, especially improvising a lot. But it doesn't ever feel like too much or like kind of earnest or something like that. It doesn't go that too far, because you also have like so much relaxation in the way you sing. That balance is really cool. So well done on that, because it's fucking hard to get
wow,
that.
that's amazing. Thank you.
But like this thing about playing by yourself, vulnerability of doing that. Do you feel really truly comfortable showing that to everybody with the lyrics and with just being alone? Like, is music a way to allow you to do that?
Well, this comes back to the title, because in navigating the world in this skin and in the world as it currently is, what I think I was coming up against quite a lot was just being misunderstood. In
what kind of way?
Just socially. I'm quite. I can be quite open and not necessarily. This is kind of one of the things that I think means that I can do this, because I'm naturally quite an open person. But it's not always appropriate. And so it's a real joy to be that vulnerable and be that open in the music, because it's allowed.
Yeah.
And it's not really allowed in many other contexts. In this society, in English society,
and German society.
I don't know,
Okay, right.
No, the German society. I mean, I haven't lived there, so I can't say for certain. But
So your
a lot of the
mum
German
was
people
born in Germany.
My mum was born in Germany, but all the German people I've met can be extremely open. Sometimes that's a different way. Potentially, but So I think that the freedom to be vulnerable is part of the reason to have made that album. Yeah.
It feels like part of the reason you make music as a whole.
Yeah. I think it's not just the freedom to be vulnerable, because it's changing. That definitely is what I've needed, but I feel like now I'm going more towards the freedom to design a reality in which I feel good. So that's a different stage. So.
It sounds like a brilliant idea. And I think you should definitely keep going in that direction. I'm going to do the same thing. Julia, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Thank you. Oh, that's great. Thank you. I could chat to you for hours.
Yeah.